The Second World War was a time when almost everyone went crazy, from horrible violence to shockingly evil experiments. Men became obsessed with devising new and more gruesome ways to kill each other. In the midst of all this chaos, there was a particular unit of researchers in the Japanese Imperial Army that decided to take things to the next level. The actions of Unit 731, as it was known, were extremely horrifying. It all began with this guy, a military surgeon known as Shiro Ishii. Shiro Ishii was born in Shibayama in Chiba Prefecture, Japan, the fourth son of Katsuya Ishii, a wealthy landowner. As a child, he was very brilliant at school. He was said to have a photographic memory and was a favorite of many teachers. However, some of his classmates described him as harsh, abrasive, and arrogant. In 1920, he graduated from the Faculty of Medicine of the Kyoto Imperial University. In 1921, Ishii was commissioned in the Imperial Japanese Army as a military sergeant with the rank of Army Surgeon, First Class. He quickly rose in the ranks of the army due to his hard work and focus. He was also very ambitious and not in a very good way. In 1927, Ishii started advocating for the creation of a Japanese bioweapons program. And in 1928, he began a 2-year tour of the West, where he did extensive research on the effects of biological warfare and chemical warfare developments from World War I. Ishii's travels were highly successful and helped him win the patronage of some top officials in the government and in the army. In 1931, Japan occupied Manchuria, which is basically a region that consists of part of northeast China and part of Russia. Since biological weapons had been banned by the Geneva Convention, the Japanese saw this as an opportunity to conduct research in a place which was not in their territory and one which also had a lot of Chinese people who could be used as experimental test subjects. Thus, Unit 731 was created and placed under the supervision of Shiro Ishii. There were a few other units that were into human experimentation. However, Unit 731 did some of the most insane experiments on prisoners. For example, human targets were used to test grenades positioned at various distances and in various positions. Flamethrowers were tested on people. Victims were also tied to stakes and used as targets to test pathogen-releasing bombs, chemical weapons, sharp nail bombs with varying amounts of fragments, and explosive bombs as well as bayonets and knives. Why would someone want to test a knife? It cuts, that's what it does. If you think that's all, then you're wrong. In other tests, subjects were deprived of food and water to determine the amount of time until death, placed into low pressure chambers until their eyes popped from the sockets, experimented upon to determine the relationship between temperature, burns, and human survival, hung upside down until death, crushed with heavy objects, electrocuted, dehydrated with hot fans, placed into centrifuge and spun until death, injected with animal blood, notably with horse blood, exposed to lethal doses of X-rays, subjugated to various chemical weapons inside gas chambers, injected with seal water, and burned or buried alive. In addition to chemical agents, the properties of many different toxics were also investigated by the unit. Massive amounts of blood were drained from some prisoners in order to study the effects of blood loss. The unit also participated in waging biological warfare against Chinese cities. For example, they contaminated water sources with very deadly bacteria and used low-flying planes to spread insects that had been infected with bubonic plague bacteria. It is estimated that more than 200,000 people died in these Japanese experiments, all under Ishii's supervision. As the Second World War started to come to an end, all prisoners within the compound were killed to conceal evidence, and there was no documented survivors. With the coming of the Red Army in August 1945, the unit had to abandon their work in haste. Ministries in Tokyo ordered the construction of all incriminating materials. Potential witnesses such as the 300 remaining prisoners were either gassed or fed poison, while the 600 Chinese and Manchurian laborers were shot. Ishii ordered every member of the group to disappear and take the secret to the grave. Potassium cyanide vials were issued for use in case the remaining personnel were captured. After the US heard of the program, they made a deal with the doctors of Unit 731. They were to hand over the findings of their entire research to the US alone, and in exchange, they would not be prosecuted for their atrocities during the wartime. Eventually, many of the unit's members got away despite all the hideous crimes they had committed. As for Ishii, who was a lieutenant general at the time, he eventually developed cancer in his throat a few years after the war. He underwent surgery and eventually lost his ability to speak. In his last days, he got baptized, became a Catholic, and adopted the name Joseph. The story of Unit 731 is a tragic tale that tells of some of the most terrible sins of science. Thanks very much for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please hit the subscribe button.